Big Podcast.
I woke up this morning, look outside. I'm in an urban area, so parking is on the street, and there is a golf cart parked in front of my house. My first thought, I hope the neighbors don't think it's mine. I look like an asshole. Anyway, another story probably. I'm seeing more of these golf carts around. It seems like it's a thing. People don't walk anymore. I mention it because perception, that is everything in life and podcasting. We're going to get into that. It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. I'm David Hooper. This is the podcast about growing your podcast audience, doing what it takes to make a bigger podcast, having a podcast that sponsors are interested in advertising on, having a podcast that people will miss if it's gone. Basically, having a podcast that matters. This is the audio edition of my weekly newsletter. That is called Big Podcast Insider. It goes out by email every Friday morning, New York City time. If you're interested in it or any of the things that I'm talking about, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 196. We're going to get into that. Don't worry about writing it down. I'm going to remind you throughout the podcast. Here's what we're covering. Building a successful podcast. The $99 miracle. 70 million listeners can't be wrong. A free productivity app to help you with your podcast production. Free sound effects. I'm also a soldier on Call of Duty. Also some classified ads, things that will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make a podcast that matters, and make a podcast that makes you money. This episode of Build a Big Podcast brought to you by Riverside.fm, a virtual studio that makes recording and editing a podcast to the highest quality possible, accessible to anyone. You're going to look and sound your best. Riverside records you and your guests locally, bypassing poor or unstable internet connections, giving you studio quality audio and video. I'm going to talk on this episode about the $99 miracle, how prices are dropping on quality equipment and things that we use to make our podcast sound great. Riverside is one of those things. You wouldn't believe how much a remote connection would cost me back in the day. And it wasn't even as good as Riverside is. Plus, not only are you going to record your podcast with Riverside, they've got what they call AI magic clips. That will transform your long-form recording into bite-sized chunks for social media with a single click. The AI automatically identifies the best moments from your episode and it clips them out for you. Curious? Yeah, you are. You want to try it? Here's how to do it for free. They're going to give you a couple of hours. Riverside.fm. That's the URL. Go there, sign up, check it out. See how great you sound. Check out these AI magic clips. Pretty amazing. If you want to stick around, I've got a discount code for you. It will get you 15% off the already low price. The code BIGPODCAST, BIGPODCAST. That's Riverside.fm. Go there for the free account right now. Try it for a couple of hours. If you want to stick around, you'll get 15% off with the discount code BIGPODCAST, BIGPODCAST. All right, let's get to it. I'm going from thing to thing to thing, all of them about podcasting, specifically growing your podcast, getting more people to your podcast, making a podcast that matters, makes a difference, and makes you money. Between each of these things, you're going to hear this sound. That's how you know I'm going to the next thing. Again, everything here at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I'll remind you, no need to write it down. You're going to have it memorized by the time this episode is over. This episode, by the way, issue 196. Let's get to it. Building a successful podcast. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, perception in podcasting is everything. And really, in life, it is everything. What we think is going on isn't necessarily what's going on. And something that's very common, even for people who are in the business, even for me, and I know very well how the business works, we think somebody's had quicker success with their podcasting efforts than they actually have. Podcast called 20VC. Listen to this. 300 episodes before we got to our first 1,000 plays per episode. 3 years before we made a single dollar from 20VC. 10 years going 7 days a week, every single weekend. That's what a year is. Showing up every single day. It takes time to build a successful podcast. You don't see the time that's being put in because you don't know that these people are out doing the work. They don't know that you're doing the work maybe until they do. This is my theory on why it takes so long. Obviously, it takes a minute for people to tell their friends and for the audience to grow. It is a slow growth thing, unless you've got something like a viral video, the Haktua girl. I talked about her a few episodes ago. She has made $1 million from a video that probably was 30 seconds long. It took off. It went everywhere. She found great management here in Nashville. That's where that video was from. He's a music business guy. I happen to know him. Really sharp. And he was able to educate her and work with her and probably use some of his connections to help her make the most of that. But a situation like that, Very rare. We see it just often enough. We think, oh, that's how it's done. There's a joke in the music business. We call it white trash wins lotto. And I'm not calling anybody out, certainly not Haley, the Hawk Tuah girl. I think she's done a great job with the deck that she has been dealt. What that refers to is when somebody comes into something instantly or seemingly instantly, and they're not ready to do something with it, trouble. Like the lottery. That's where that's from. Most lottery winners in a couple of years are in a worse off situation than the day before they won the lottery. If you can't manage a little money, you're not going to be able to add a lot of money. That's when the real trouble, the real work comes in. Let's look at the alternative to that, though. 20 VC. 300 episodes before we got to 1,000 plays per episode. Those guys know what they're doing by that point. So when something does take off, they're ready for it. And this is one of the reasons that it takes a long time for something to take off. Not only is the growth slow at first, friends telling friends, and maybe it's one or two, not 100 telling 100, or thousands of people telling thousands of people. That's slow. But it also takes time to be a good host. Think about your very first episode. Do you have a tape of that? If so, I'd love to hear it. Reach out to me, Mastodon, Blue Sky, Threads. I would love to hear it. I would love to hear some examples of very first episodes that I can share on this podcast and then say, well, here's where he is now. My very first stuff, unfortunately, I don't have because it was on reel-to-reel tape. It was that long ago. And I never thought that I was going to be in radio or podcasting. Never in a million years. I got into radio because I was in a band and I wanted to play my own music on the air. That whole story, if you want to read it, bigpodcast.com, that's got it. What I ended up doing was radio promotion. And when you hear me talk about the music business, I spent 20-something years as a music marketer, some of that being in radio promotion. Then I got back into radio. So the point is, I don't have that stuff. It wasn't as easy for us to record ourselves as it is now. So take advantage of that. Go back to those old tapes. See how far you've come along. It is very tough when we are doing it day to day to day because this incremental process is so slow to see that we're actually getting better. But you are. I've got something coming up. It's a 30-day solo podcast challenge. This is going to be next couple of weeks or so. If you're interested, make sure you go on the newsletter, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I will talk about it here on the podcast. But these are some things that you can do 30 days in a row that by the end of those 30 days, you're going to be a more competent host. You're going to have a clear message. You're going to be more confident behind the mic. You're going to sound a lot better. One of the things I talk about during this training is going back to that very first episode that you cut, that very first day of the training, and comparing it with where you are now. I'm shortcutting the learning process. So you're going to see a difference within a couple of weeks, maybe even a week. You go back, oh man, that wasn't as good as where I am now. But you certainly do that over months and years. So consider that. Keep an eye out for it. It will be here, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. One click is all it takes. iPhone, Android, RSS feed. I got them all, man. One click for you. You'll never miss an episode. And I will let you know about the 30-day solo podcast challenge. It is coming. Lots of people are participating already. I'd love for you to be a part of it. And I'll have more information for you shortly. Let's talk about Big Podcast AMP. Speaking of training, if you like the newsletter, if you like the podcast, you're going to love Big Podcast AMP. That stands for Audio Monetization Program. It's a personal coaching program, and I'm going to help you do three things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. And 3 is the monetization. Make more money with your podcast and also your podcasting skills. If you can get behind the mic and deliver a message, there are opportunities for you. Most people cannot. You've seen them on YouTube. These jump cuts, people can't get through a sentence. You can. I'll help you with that 30-day solo podcast challenge to do it even better. By the way, that 30-day solo podcast challenge, if you want to be a part of AMP, you're going to get that for free. Details at bigpodcast.com/AMP, bigpodcast.com/AMP. The $99 miracle. I'm going to change this to the $99 podcasting miracle. In general, the things that we use to make podcasts are getting cheaper. And the process of making a podcast is easier. I call the $99 miracle the Shure SM57. Great mic. One of those popular instrument microphones, great on a snare drum, that is also being used for podcasting. Shure SM58, more or less the same mic, a different cover on it. It's got a windscreen. A lot of people like that. I love it. My daily podcast, I use a Shure SM58. By the way, I'm using a mic called the RE20 for this podcast, if you're curious. But if I had a 58, a 57 in here, fine. It's a great mic, $99, and they've kept the price the same. I've got an interesting graphic for you that you can see see where costs have dropped, where things have gotten more expensive, and you see that $99 mic for the last 20-something years. Still $99, but $99, thanks to inflation, a little less money than it used to be. So you can get this mic cheaper. Anyway, go to newsletter.podcast.com, issue number 196 to see the graphic. Let's talk a little bit more about this. I want to make sure that you don't take it for granted. And maybe you're newer to podcasting and you think this is how it was. I mentioned just a minute ago, my old radio tape is literally on magnetic tape somewhere. I've got a reel 35 years ago that is somewhere, I hope. Someday I'll find it. And I hope when I do that I'm not disappointed in it. I don't think I would be because I've kept it up. You can't expect yourself to be great when you start. But think about that reel. That reel, I don't know, probably now $15, $20. The 2-inch reels that we used to record music on, those are about $400 right now. Maybe a little more now than they used to be because they don't make them everywhere like they used to. But still, the point is, you've got either 15 or 30 minutes of recording on these 2-inch tapes. For $400? What? No, we don't have to worry about that at all. Have you ever purchased a tape? If you're under 30, probably not. Everything's been digital for a while. So we don't have to worry about that at all. I'm recording into Audacity right now. Free software. Speaking of reel-to-reels, I made the joke that your grandfather spent $5,000 on a reel-to-reel recorder that had so much tape hiss, it sounded like a white noise machine. It was the best he had. That was it. Now, if you do have tape hiss, whatever we want to call it, noise fork, some kind of hiss, you can remove it via software. And some of that software is free. Audacity's got some great plugins. If you haven't checked out Audacity lately, do check it out. Audacityteam.org is the website. Here's what I want to know. If you had $100 to spend on podcasting today, how would you spend it? What's your $99 miracle? Reach out to me. Mastodon, Blue Sky, or Threads for the links to all of those. And also that graph with the Shure SM57 showing $99 for the last 20-something years, as well as everything that's gone up in price and a lot of the technology we use for podcasting, which has come down. You can find that at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 196. The pros and cons of exclusive podcast. Let me take you way back. Let's go 40 years. In the early 80s, I was a 10-year-old kid. I loved music videos. And music videos, that was a big deal. For our generation, it was like, yeah. We felt we were on the cutting edge of something. Our parents had radio, grandparents, records, piano reels, whatever. We had music videos. And MTV was so popular, one play on MTV, it was the equivalent promotion of tens of thousands of plays on broadcast radio because it was nationwide. But for some of us, me included, because cable was not everywhere in the early 80s, maybe 30% of households, we had non-MTV music video outlets. And the biggest was on NBC, broadcast show. It was called Friday Night Videos.
This week, Friday Night Videos graphics won an Emmy. And so tonight on the Emmy Award-winning Friday Night Videos, broadcast premieres from UB40 with Chrissy Hynde, Cameo, and Morris Day, plus Madonna, Aha, Prince, John Cougar Mellencamp, Dire Straits, The Hooters, Daryl Hall and John Oates with David Ruffin and Eddie Kendrick of The Temptations, Saga, and John Parr.
Friday Night Videos reached about 99.7% of all households in America. So much bigger audience. It was free, at least if you had a television. You didn't have to pay for it. And unlike MTV that was 24/7, you had 90 minutes, maybe it was 2 hours, I don't remember. Everything was concentrated. So if you could get your video on Friday Night Videos, it plays Friday night early into Saturday morning in some time zones. That next week, you're going to see a bump in album sales. I was thinking about this because I'm seeing more and more exclusive deals in podcasting. And people get excited about it because there's extra promotion or extra royalties when you sign these exclusive deals. And sometimes they're worth it. I've got an exclusive deal for the digital version of my book, Big Podcast, at Amazon. An exclusive deal for the audio version of Big Podcast at Audible. I get a little bit more money. And the reason I did that was because the little money, because I'm driving most of the traffic, adds up. I could drive traffic anywhere. Might as well drive it to Amazon. A lot of people are familiar with Amazon. Might as well drive it to Audible. A lot of people are familiar with Audible. So in the end, I'm reaching probably just as many people. You may be the same if you do an exclusive deal. If you know that the majority of your people, your listeners, are listening on Spotify, for example, and you do an exclusive deal with Spotify, not a big deal that you're not everywhere else. But if you've got a large audience that is everywhere, spread out over all sorts of other podcasting properties, YouTube, Apple Podcast, who knows? And who knows what's going to be invented in the next year, 2, 3, 5 years? There are going to be a lot more of them, a lot more opportunities for you to get your content. That exclusive deal, that can bite you. And that's why these exclusive deals, sometimes they'll be 3 to 5 years. You think, oh man, it's cool, Amazon's number one. I'm not going to lose that many people. Audible's number one. Not going to lose that many people. Yeah, now. But things change in a heartbeat. And I'm seeing people come into the podcasting space, and they'll have big names attached to them. I've talked about the story of CBS. They came to me wanting to do a deal. I don't know, this might have been 10 years ago. They wanted to put one of my podcasts on their network, and they wanted exclusivity. I was like, no, because I was thinking about MTV, and I was thinking about all the other things that I've seen with exclusive deals. If you want to know what's happening in the future, look at the past. We've got a very, very short attention span. And sometimes, again, taking it to the under 30 guys, maybe you weren't around. I can't blame you for not knowing what was happening on MTV in 82. You weren't around. But look to the past, because all this stuff, psychology, network, reach, all this stuff is the same these days. And it is probably more important for you to think about these things now, because something like MTV even, cable guy comes and hooks it up, it still works like a broadcast television. People knew what to do to get MTV. Their new networks, I don't even know how to get them. Where are they? It's some kind of app? Is it a video? Is it audio? Is it a snippet? I got to download something. I've got to get login credentials. No. I think the most important thing is that we make it easy on our listeners. Have your podcast, one, where they are, and make it easy to consume. We're seeing this with Joe Rogan and his Spotify deal. He just re-upped it, $200 million, something like that. Who's counting? Originally, he had an exclusive deal. It was Spotify only. They took him off of YouTube. The audience he had didn't follow him. Not all of them. Some of them did. Uh-oh. Now what? Put him back on YouTube, just clips. And now what they're doing to re-up this thing is they're having him everywhere. They figured out a way to make it work where it's non-exclusive. They still pay him the money, and they can make even more money because of it. Anyway, think about these exclusive deals. If you want more thoughts on these, I've got them. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 196. 70 million listeners can't be wrong. This is a podcasting lesson from Michael Jackson. Why do some things take off and others seem to be ignored? A lot of that is marketing, but there's a great saying in marketing that marketing a bad product only makes it fail faster. I'm working on an NPR-style narrative piece this week, and I've recorded so far about 50 minutes of tape. The final broadcast version, it needs to be 5 minutes or less, so I'm having to cut. I'm going through all this, putting the story together, listening to the rough cut. It sounds so simple when I go through it. And this is me knowing what I'm doing, being there in the moment when I'm getting the tape, finding the pieces of tape, putting them together. I think, oh, this is simple. I got about 4 minutes. Yeah, it probably took me about 5 minutes to do this. No, it did not. I've got a story about Michael Jackson. I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 196. And it talks about making something look simple. When people say something looks easy, that's a compliment. And making something short is actually harder than making a longer version of the same thing. I talked about Joe Rogan, 2 to 4 hour podcast. He's just in there, blah, 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 blah. Easy for him. He's not doing any kind of editing. The people who are doing the editing, those are the guys that are working. And if you're editing your own podcast, if you're trying to be like me and you've got 50 minutes of that raw tape and you've got to get a story out of it, but not just any story, a story that's going to be 4 or 5 minutes long, that's work. Going back and editing even a monologue podcast like this. Right now, I am 28 minutes and 30 seconds in. Big Podcast Supercomputer, give it to me.
This is the Big Podcast Supercomputer with a courtesy time check. You are now 19 minutes and 58 seconds into this episode. Approximately 10 minutes of tape, roughly 1/3 of what was recorded, has been removed.
That's a lot of editing. That takes work. Shorter is actually more work than a longer podcast. Making it look easy is actually more work than making it look difficult. If you like the album Thriller by Michael Jackson, I've got an interesting story about that. Again, that's linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 196. Let me give you the punchline. There's a song on there, and it was mixed 93 times. 93 different mixes for them to find the one that they released on Thriller. You know which one they used? 2. 2. Could they have stopped in? Maybe, but sometimes you got to get in an experiment. He made it look flawless, but Michael Jackson, as well as the other guys on that record, they put in a lot of work. I've got the behind the scenes stories if you're interested. They all relate to your podcast. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 196. I've got a free productivity app for you. This is going to help you with your podcast production. One of the things I love about it is the collaboration feature. You and your co-host, you and your guest, if you need certain things, you can make a publicly available list. You can trade lists. You can print lists, make it in a PDF, send it to your guest. There's so many things you can do with this. It's called Twos. The web version has always been free, but if you sign up right now, and I've got a special link for you at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 196. You're going to get the upgraded mobile app for free as well. When it comes to this stuff, I use an app called Things. A few years ago, I switched to an app called Marvin. I love both of those. Both of them are excellent. Twos, this freebie that I've got for you, it is on the same level in my opinion. Reminders, calendar integration, daily journaling, task management, seamless sharing and collaboration, free email, text, and WhatsApp integration. So if you're out and about, you think of something, you can dictate it into your phone, put it in Siri, send it via WhatsApp. It goes on your list automatically. It's very cool. It's cross-platform, all your stuff on both desktop and mobile. Again, it's free, nothing to buy. And right now you get all those mobile upgrades that people normally are charged for free as well. I've also got a video of the developer linked. He's sharing why he's doing this. It's cool, man. You're going to learn something from that too. It's a way to grow your audience and get people excited about what you're doing. I would not mention this to you if he were not doing this free promotion. So do check it out if you want a marketing lesson or just a great productivity app. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 196. Free sound effects. I got another freebie for you. If you need sound effects for your podcast, Audio is the name of this site, not AUDIIO. That's another audio site. This is AUDIO, a vast collection of high-quality sound effects you can use without charge. I've got it linked for you, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 196. I'm also a soldier on Call of Duty. This is my favorite joke. It's a guy on a date with a woman, and he says, "What do you do?" And she says, "I'm a model on Instagram. How about you?" "Oh, I'm a soldier on Call of Duty." And I think it's so funny because a comic friend of mine, this guy's on the road all the time, dozens and dozens of dates per year, in the hundreds. And he's like, "Man, I got all these internet comics. They never leave their house. They say they're comics, but are you a real comic if you're not in the clubs, on the road, testing material in front of a live audience?" And I don't know. They're musicians like that. I think we're in a great space when it comes to reaching people. I talked about the $99 miracle, how cheap things are getting, our ability to reach people. Amazing. So this stuff is good. However, there's something to be said about getting in the trenches, actually nose to nose, toes to toes with people, getting that instant reaction. You know I love putting jokes in these newsletters. If you haven't seen it, newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 196. Here's a tease. Imagine connecting to a remote session and your guest shows up wearing a gamer headset. The guy who's a soldier on Call of Duty, also a podcast guest. I'm curious if anything like that's happened to you. You're interviewing a CEO, big time business guy, and dude shows up in a flashy USB headset. It happens sometimes. If you had that experience, let me know. Mastodon, Blue Sky, or Threads. Check out the joke. Reach out to me if you have had a similar experience like that. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 196. Classified ads for you, things that will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make a podcast that people care about. Podpage, you can join over 25,000 podcasters and almost automatically, create a beautiful, listener-friendly podcast from your RSS feed. That's all you do. Plug your RSS feed in. Boom. It outputs the page for you. You got to edit it. That's why it's not quite automatic. But you can be up 15, 20 minutes easy. It's the simplest way to create a podcast website. I've got a link for you to try it for free. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Cast Magic, automated episode notes. Do you like doing episode notes? Most people do not. Enter Cast Magic. Over 35,000 podcasters have used Cast Magic to automate episode notes, but also highlight clips, podcast summaries, blog posts, social media posts, newsletters. You upload your podcast audio, Cast Magic does the rest. Another freebie for you. Check it out. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com for the special link. Are you subscribed to Big Podcast yet? This is how to do it. Never miss an episode by going to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Go there now. I've made it easy for you. One click is all it takes. You will never miss an episode. And while you are there, do check out some of the other podcasting services that I offer when it comes to growing your audience, getting more people to your podcast, and making a podcast that people care about. I've got some things that are free of charge, including Big Podcast Extra, short emails to help you build an audience, attract clients, and make more money via podcasting. The Podcast Growth Toolkit, I call it the Swiss Army knife of podcasting. Guest agreements, episode templates, things that you can put into place right now to make your podcasting process easier. Again, those two things are free. And if you've got a little money, you want to make even more of it, I've got Big Podcast AMP, the audio monetization program. I mentioned it earlier. AMP, audio monetization program. Personalized coaching for indie podcasters to help you grow your podcast audience and build your authority, brand, and reputation. If you are serious about podcasting, if you are serious about putting good content out that connects with people, that inspires people, that changes lives, and can change your life, and it can. It's certainly changed mine. It's changed the lives of a lot of the people that I've worked with, and it can change yours as well. I want you to check it out. It's bigpodcast.com/AMP, AMP. It's the audio monetization program, bigpodcast.com/AMP. Thanks for listening to Build a Big Podcast. I appreciate you. You are one of the reasons that podcasting has been life-changing to me. I do not take it for granted. I will see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.